Hello, and welcome to another exciting instalment of Brodie's Bedtime, with me, Brodie's dad. And with me, Toronto. Hello, Toronto. How are you today?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. I've got a bow tie on today because it's a special day.
You wear a bow tie every day.
What?
Like every episode we've done, you've had that bow tie on.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you can't take it off. It's attached to you.
Oh, I see.
Do you want to tell them what the special occasion is today?
Oh, okay then. Well, Brodie, it's St. George's Day, which is, he's the patron saint of England, among other things. So your daddy and me have had to do a bit of research, because your daddy's Scottish and I'm Canadian.
That's right, yeah. We weren't really sure about St. George, so your daddy's done a little bit of research. And, well, should we tell them all about St. George?
Oh, okay then.
Do you want to sit on my knee while I do it?
All right then.
Okay. So Saint George, I said on my knee. Thank you. So Saint George is patron saint of England, even though he's actually from Syria or Palestine or that area, and he was a Roman soldier who refused to recant his Christianity despite the promise of huge amounts of wealth and lands personally by the Roman emperor. He still refused to recant his Christianity. So he had his head cut off, and he was what was known as a Christian martyr. And as a result of him, I believe the emperor's wife converted to Christianity as well, but I could be wrong there. But it's not just Christians who honor him. The Islamic faith does as well. They have a slightly different story regarding him. It's a little bit more unpleasant, so I won't go into it today, but he's recognized by the Islamic faith too. And of course, the big rumor is that he slayed a dragon with a lance called Ascalon, which was actually the name of Churchill's, Winston Churchill, who we'll get to in a minute, his private aeroplane, named it after St. George's lance. But today is St. George's Day, and it's celebrated here in England. You're English. We thought we'd celebrate it, but I think the Swedes recognise it as well. The Spanish do. Obviously, the Georgians do. They have a similar flag. And a couple of other countries do as well, I think. But it is England's patron saint. So we're going to be looking at all things English today. I say all things. Lots of English things. There's about 50 million of you. But first of all, nice cup of tea. Very English, and you see the tea in there. Maybe you can't quite see the tea. And we've got it in a mug for a football team, your daddy's football team. Football is another English invention. That's your daddy's team, a very English team, Tottenham Hotspur from London. And they've won the good old English competition of the FA Cup 8 times. Which your daddy's going to remind himself of a lot this weekend because they won't be winning it this season. But yeah, easy come, easy go. Now, judging by all the paraphernalia you got last week when I saw you, you're probably going to support Wolverhampton Wanderers, which is also supported by another quite famous Englishman, Robert Plant. He's a big fan of Wolverhampton Wanderers. He first went to the Molineux when he was 5, and he claims that Billy Wright waved at him. So he became a fan from there on. But he was the lead singer of a great English rock band called Led Zeppelin, who your daddy's a big fan of. Other great English bands, the Beatles. They're from England too. Liverpool, mostly, but entirely. But that is the front cover of their very, very famous album and your daddy's favourite Beatles album, Abbey Road. And they are walking across the zebra crossing, which you can go and do, which we might do one day if you like the Beatles. So, other English things, other English commodities, along with tea, we like beer. This is actually quite a modern English beer from Yorkshire, which is where your daddy lives. That's a Rooster's Yankee. It's all right. Your daddy got it because it was cheap more than anything. £1.50. Also, you can make tea in a teapot. Again, this is a very modern, fancy teapot, not a traditional English teapot, but we're living in modern, fancy Britain. There you go, one of them. You put your tea leaves into that bit there in the middle, and you infuse it in the water, and then you pour it out into a cup. You have a little bit of milk, and a little bit of sugar. Mummy likes a little bit of sugar in her tea, and maybe one day you can grow up and drink tea too. You're a bit young. And another great English commodity, Marmite, which I look forward to the day when you first try it, because you pull some of the funniest faces when you're eating. But your daddy likes Marmite on his toast in the morning for his breakfast. Breakfast, another great English thing. So we're going to look at a few other English people. This is Alfred Hitchcock's film Psycho. Alfred Hitchcock was an English film director, and he made thrillers and films with a lot of suspense, and Psycho is one of them. Great. Another great Englishman, Winston Churchill, who I mentioned earlier. In fact, he named his plane after St. George's Lance, but he was a great Englishman. Actually, he was half American. His mummy was American. We're a very sort of multicultural country. And he was Prime Minister twice, actually, during World War II, and then afterwards again in the early 1950s, when he was getting on a bit by then. Another great Englishman, Shakespeare, William Shakespeare. He was a very famous playwright who lived during the time mostly of Queen Elizabeth I, who was another wonderful English woman. She was queen for several decades and oversaw what in British history is known as the Golden Era. I think it's quite popular because we had a bit of a empirical expansion and, saw off several threats, namely from the Spanish, who I mentioned earlier. And Daddy's going to have another swig of tea. And then finally, a very modern Englishman. Actually, he's part Turkish, but again, quite multicultural. Boris Johnson, who's, he has been Mayor of London. He's currently the Foreign Secretary, but he's very English in that he went to Eton, which is a very fine English school, and then to Oxford, which is a very fine English university, and now he is a member of the Conservative government, which is a very fine old English party. So there you go. That is little bits of England in a nutshell. No doubt in the future we'll be doing more English things, as you live in England and are primarily English, and even your daddy and Toronto. Yes, you, who's Canadian.
We'll do a Canadian episode one day.
Yeah, sure, we can do a Canadian episode one day. We both live in England. And, English is the most widely spoken language in the world, just ahead of Mandarin, which is one of the many, many Chinese languages, but there's lots of Chinese spoken in the world, so widely spoken language as well. So, a final note, happy St. George's Day again. I'm sure you'll be doing something very exciting. And lots of love from me and Toronto. Bye, Brodie. And I'll say good night and see you next week for another episode of Brodie's Bedtime. Bye.